Good evening and welcome to the Thai PBS World. Right now, Singapore has entered the third phase of the country of reopening the country again after it has already managed the situation of rising number of infection of COVID-19. The country also has begun vaccination campaign, and in May this year, the government of Singapore plans to host the World Economic Forum. And in an exclusive interview with the Thai ambassador to Singapore, Khun Thep Chayong, and I asked the ambassador of how the country and the government of Singapore has handled the situation so well. In terms of vaccine, we know that Singapore will be the first country in Asia that the government will roll out vaccine to people. Do you know what's the plan of the government in terms of the rollout of the vaccine?
Yes, this is the news that everyone has been waiting for here in Singapore. I think about 2-3 days ago, the first batch of the Pfizer vaccine has already arrived. And as we know, is that there'll be 3 vaccines at least here in Singapore: the Pfizer vaccine, the Moderna vaccine, and then the Sinovac vaccine, right? So the plan is they have built, we understand, an infrastructure, what we call cold storage infrastructure, a cold storage chain, in order to manage, especially the Pfizer vaccine, which requires minus 70 degrees Celsius in order to ensure the vaccine remains effective. The target is to start rolling out to priority groups, and as far as we know, the priorities right now are the health workers, as well as the elderly, all right, those who are more vulnerable. And then the plan is, I think by the third quarter of next year, 2021, the goal is to have it, vaccinated for the entire population here in Singapore. So, but what we are also seeing is that because of the infrastructure that Singapore has put in place, we think that Singapore is not only preparing to be just the vaccination for people here in Singapore, they are prepared to become a distribution center for perhaps even at least in Southeast Asia or the Asia Pacific region, because the capacities are being ramped up right now. So this is how we see the vaccination program and the vaccination transportation program evolving here in this country.
Mr. Ambassador, as we all know that Singapore will be hosting the next World Economic Forum in May this year, right? So, and that means thousands of people from all over the world will be invited to Singapore. So as things stand now, does the Singaporean government really intend to have all these participants physically present at the conference?
Well, that is a very important question. Let me just start by saying that I believe the approach that Singapore is using now, based on the confidence that they have gained from managing the pandemic, it's now about, I think today we had only 5 cases, 4 imported cases and 1 case in the community. It's the first community case in a couple of weeks. So they are confident, and so they have developed what we call a risk-managed approach. That is, they look at the various risk factors. How do they weigh between the pandemic, controlling the pandemic, ensuring public safety, health safety, at the same time to open the economy in order to support 2 goals, which is recovery and preparedness and readiness for the post-COVID situation. So based on this risk management approach, they feel that they are ready to host the World Economic Forum meeting here in Singapore in May. There will be, of course, very strict health protocols in place. How do you ensure people coming in from the airport to go to the conference venue and to the hotel sites? It may be in the same place, we don't know yet, but the protocols will be quite strict. But the idea is that we understand that the Singaporean authorities feel that they can manage this in order to help in the economic recovery. And it will send a strong message that the pandemic is under control and that the economic recovery and the activities in the post-COVID situation can take place simultaneously. So that is how we see things with regard to the WEF that is envisaged to be held in May of 2021.
So that may lead to having more travelers, having tourists into Singapore more freely as well?
That is also part of the plan, but it is separate from the WEF situation, because in the WEF, it will be very controlled itinerary and controlled movements. Now, as to trying to promote tourism, what Singapore has been doing is develop what we call travel bubbles. I think one has been agreed to with Hong Kong, SAR, but it has been suspended because of the spike in cases in Hong Kong. But the idea of a travel bubble is that for two countries, they can travel without the quarantine, and as long as there are certain safeguards in place, such as frequent testing and measures of that sort. So yes, we can see Singapore probably preparing, looking at alternatives to have more tourism, but it will be with selected countries, those that I think Singapore feels that will be safe for them to open to tourists.
Ambassador Surya, how has your life as a diplomat been disrupted? How do you manage to get your work done amid all these restrictions?
Well, we don't use the word disrupted, but shall we say to be more transformed under the new situation. We basically do a lot of our work online. A lot of video conferencing, a lot of meetings are held online, but of course, because of the relaxation of measures in phase 2 and phase 3, we are able to meet our counterparts in both the Singaporean government and with the diplomatic community, as well as with the private sector and academic community here in Singapore, but with very strict practicing of the safeguards that are in place, whether it's wearing a mask, safe distancing, and other measures. And of course, one thing that I think Singapore has been successful, which I hope many countries, and I think many countries are trying to do as well, is to have an application where most people have applied to. Like, for instance, the Trace Together application in Singapore, already 70% of the population here in Singapore has already registered and are using it actively. So this is something I think that we should encourage people in other countries to use the applications of that country to help in the tracing, tracking, and help in the fight against the pandemic.